Hi guys, Darth Deuce here, back on our Star Wars figure review. Today we've got something a bit different. It is the Star Wars Bandai Tamashii Nations movie realization Daimyo Boba Fett from the Book of Boba Fett. Very cool figure that just released. This is a line, if you're not familiar with, it's a line that's created by Bandai Tamashii Nations, same as SH Figuarts. And they take Star Wars characters and they kind of reimagine them in this sort of old school samurai design and make figures of them. And I have a handful of them. I have a small collection of them. I don't have all of them by any means, so I got a small collection of them. Very cool figures. Ones I always felt were maybe a little overpriced for what they were, and ones I never bought. Like I said, never bought a ton of them, but all the ones I have bought have been really cool. But this one in particular has been one I've been very much looking forward to, especially since I haven't bought a movie realization figure in a long time. Partly because they haven't been releasing a ton of stuff. Like we got this guy this year. I think they only released the Beskar Mando last year. I don't think there's another one. And the year before that was, I think, only the Durasteel Mando. For some reason, I feel like there might have been an IG88 or IG11 they released, maybe, but they don't release the figures in this line like they used to. But I was really excited for this guy ever since day one, really, or ever since it was like put up for pre-order, and now it's here, and I am pretty happy with it. But first off, taking a look at the packaging, you've got the standard box packaging that the Bandai movie realization figures come in, which I think is pretty nice. It's pretty simple, but looks high end, and it's easy to repackage the figure in it and all that jazz, which I like for my high end figures. I think this one's a little wider than some of the old releases for some reason. But you got a nice image of the figure on the front there. And on the side, just a Daimyo Boba Fett. On the back, you get a rundown of the accessories and different poses and features that come around with the figure. And you got a close-up of the helmet of the figure. And then that is pretty much it for the packaging. So I'll get the figure out and we'll take a closer look. Now I have the figure here, the packaging, with none of his accessories on or anything like that. And I think this is a beautiful looking figure. I think all the figures they've done this line, but for whatever reason, this one especially, I think the paint and the sculpt just looks absolutely phenomenal. I think the design from Boba Fett, from the Book of Boba Fett, translates really well into this samurai design. All the Mando characters they've done, I think it's a prime armor design that just translate really well to that old samurai design. Yeah, I really like the look of this guy. First up, taking a look, we've got the helmet, which I think looks great. I really like how it's sculpted and designed. Looks pretty aggressive looking, and I think the paint is super clean. And it's got a nice black wash that isn't too heavy, but just enough to bring out all that sculpted detail, which I think looks really good. This back bit is a bit of a softer plastic to allow for a bit more articulation and range of movement. And just looks really, really good. He does have the rangefinder. You can move it down. And it is painted really nicely as well. Looks really nice. I like that a lot. The rest of the figure, you got his emblem there on his chest, which looks great. More great weathering. It might be a little hard to tell on camera, but for some reason the green on the torso specifically is darker than the green on the helmet and the rest of the armor bits on his body, like on his around his waist and whatnot. I'm not sure if that was intentional or they just weathered the torso a lot more than they weathered the rest of the green on the figure. I'm not sure. It's not so bad where it really detracts too much from the figure, but it is a little noticeable. But it still looks good. I really like the yellow they use for the shoulder armor, and then this nice black wash to bring out that sculpt detail. I think it looks really nice. And on this side, you've got a really cleanly applied Mythosaur skull emblem on there. I really love that. That looks great. And then on the gauntlets, you have kind of these reimagined versions of his wrist weaponry and gadgets. He's got this like chain claw launcher, and you've got like this big piece here. It probably was where like the chain would coil around and store. I think that's super cool. And he's got like painted and sculpted strings rope that holds that into place, which I think is super cool. And then you got the hands as well. And then on this side, you've got like a big, bulkier, more archaic version of that wrist rocket launcher, or whatever this is supposed to be, which I think got like this big, more convoluted mechanism, which I think is pretty cool. And again, nicely painted and sculpted. Belt looks nice. I like the paint work that went in to make it look like leather. And I like how he's got like these more old school bullets, I guess those would be, or these different canisters or whatever around the waist. I think look really good. And you got the back armor there, and then the back skirt piece that's sculpted to have tears and rips at the end there. This is just a plastic piece. It is somewhat pliable. It's not too flexible. It's decent though, and they sculpted it in such a way where it just is kind of flat, so it doesn't go around the leg, so it doesn't hinder a lot of articulation. It's really nice. And then the belt, and this is all one solid piece that just floats around the waist. It does kind of shift around and move around a bit, which makes it a little finicky, I guess, but it's not a big deal. Pants look good. There's not a whole lot to say. He does have some sculpted pouches there, which I think is neat. And then you've got the knee guards, which look good. Again, I really like that shade of yellow they used with the burgundy reddish lower legs, and then the big boots there with like the strings kind of look like old school samurai sandals or something, which is pretty neat. So yeah, I think this figure looks really great. Definitely looks premium, I will say that for sure. In terms of articulation, also pretty well articulated, which I was expecting to have decent articulation, you know, coming from Bandai figure arts, you know, you'd expect that. But this guy gets some poses that I wasn't expecting him to be able to get with just the design of the armor and whatnot. We do have a dumbbell joint, or actually rather multiple joints in the neck. You got up in the base as well as the neck. He looked really far up, actually, way further up than I would have expected, because of this piece can rotate up in the back. And he looks down an okay amount. You get a little bit of pivot, and you get rotation. You can hear it squeaking. It is fairly tight, but it's not too bad. The shoulder pads can actually shift down. They're on their own joint, and then you can get the arms pretty much all the way up. There's also a butterfly joint there. You get a bit of range of motion there. Nothing too crazy, but it can move in a bit, which is nice. You get a swivel there up at the shoulder as well as up at the elbow. A bend of the elbow, which goes maybe slightly past 90. And then a rotation at the wrist as well as a hinge. You can either have it going up and down or in and out depending on how you rotate the joint, which is really good for lots of options. Joint in the waist can go back quite a bit, go forward, crunch just a little bit, pivots just a little bit, and then rotates, you know, very freely, which is good. Hip joints kick forward pretty much all the way. You can do quite the spread, actually. It's pretty good. There is a rotation up there. It doesn't go all the way around, but it does get a fair amount of rotation in there. Double hinge at the knee, which is actually fairly well sculpted where it doesn't look too ugly for the most part. You can bend it very far, actually. I don't think there's not really a rotation there, but there is rotation at the ankle as well as a pivot, a hinge that goes up and down, and then a toe bend that is basically pointless because it barely moves, but it is there. So actually pretty good articulation. I'll try to show off some of that posability here in a moment, because now we will go over accessories, because he does come with quite a bit of stuff and a lot of good stuff as well. First off, hand options. He comes packed, or I think he's packed, doesn't matter. I have on him 2 fists. You also get a right trigger hand. You get a left kind of open support hand that also kind of sort of has a trigger hand, so you could probably use it for one of the guns if you wanted to. A left kind of melee weapon, or right melee weapon gripping hand, and then a left melee gripping hand, which I think are the same. They're a pair. So not a ton of hand options, if I'm being honest, but enough to do what you want. So I'm not too fussed about it. Of course, he's got to have his jetpack. It is sculpted and painted pretty nicely. With those highlights of blue, that black wash again. There are ball joints at each thruster, so they do pivot around quite a bit, actually. The missile I thought would be removable, but it doesn't seem like it's going to come off. It's either glued in there or it's molded in there. I don't think that it comes out. I don't want to force it and break it. And it just pegs onto the back there. It is kind of sort of keyed, so it won't rotate willy-nilly on you. The connection is a bit loose, like it won't just fall off if you're moving them, but if you're like posing around, it will kind of knock off fairly easily, so it's something to keep in mind, where I'd probably put the jetpack on after you're done posing them. So, but I think it looks pretty good on him. I am actually going to take it off right now just for easiness. He does come with, like most of the figures come with, his katana, which I think looks great, and the sheath. The sheath is just a simple green piece. but does the job. And the katana is very nice. Nice silver painted blade with a bit of paint for the grip there. Looks good. There is a piece here where you can actually slide the sheath in so you can store the sword on his hip there, which I think is great. And the sword fits in easily, and it kind of, when you push it all the way in, kind of locks in a bit, and then it looks really good and it's not going to fall out at all. So that's really nice. I will show him with that sword equipped, because why not? Take one of the hands here. It's got a very tight grip on the sword, which is good. And you pop that in the hand there. And he's wielding the sword. So I think that's super cool. I think he looks really nice with the sword. I really like that. And I think it's a nice length as well. They did do other Mandalorian characters. They did a couple versions of the original trilogy Boba Fett, as well as a Jango Fett. And they gave them shorter katanas. But this one's a bit more normal size, I guess. I think it looks really nice. I really like that a lot. I think he looks super badass with the sword. Not the only melee weapon he comes with, though, because this is the Book of Boba Fett. Boba Fett. He's got to come with the gaffy stick, the Gatterfee, which I think is super cool. They include this. It's pretty big, you know. It stands almost the height of the figure. This is a 7-inch scale figure, by the way. I forgot to mention that. Looks great. Sculpted and painted really nicely. Not a whole lot different from how it looks in the show. It's already kind of an archaic weapon, so they didn't have to do too much to it. I really like the black wash on the wood part, though. It really brings out the sculpted detail of that wood. It makes it, you know, look like wood, which is great. It can be a little finicky to get in the hands, because I kind of wish this would come apart to make it easy just so you slide it in the hands, but you kind of got to get into the hands instead. I'm not a huge fan of that, but, you know, it's doable. See if I can get him holding it real quick. It's a bit more finicky to get him to hold this with the way the hands are and the articulation, but it is doable. Let me see if I can get a quick little pose here. It's going to be a pretty bad pose. I'm not trying to, for time's sake, I'm not trying to take a whole lot of time here. But you can get him holding it with two hands, and if you work around with it, you can get it to look pretty good. So there you go. You put it down like that. There you go. So I think that looks super cool. Very happy they include that. Kind of wish you could plug it onto his back somehow for storage, but it's not a big deal, not a deal breaker or anything. But it would have been a nice little feature. Of course, he does also have to come with his guns. It comes with his pistol, which is done to be more like a flintlock kind of gun, but still looks kind of Star Wars-y like it does in the show in a bit. It does have a moving hammer there. I do be careful with this, though. This comes off really easily. You don't want to lose that piece. So, yeah, I guess try not to really touch that too much. It looks good. And he can hold it. He also has a holster for it. So I will actually get this out of his hand here. Pop that off. Put the trigger hand on. And you can get him to hold the pistol. He holds it pretty, well, relatively secure. I've had this hand holding the rifle, which I'll show in a second. And when he's holding the rifle, it kind of stretches the hand out a bit. Makes the grip a bit more loose for the pistol, because it's got a lot smaller of a handle. But you can get him to hold it looking pretty good. So I like that. You can also take that out, and it can store on this holster here on his hip there. It just slots in nice and securely, and it's on a couple hinges, so it can move around. You can kind of move it how you want it, and it can get out of the way for posing and whatnot, which I think is very nice. And like I did mention, he also, of course, has to come with his rifle. Again, reimagine this Corvette old school flintlock style. The sculpt and paint to make it look like wood on the wood parts look really good. Again, has that hammer there. This one doesn't fall off quite as easily, but still, I'd be careful with that. Looks great. Again, and hold this, no problem. With the trigger hand, weave it in there. He holds it nice and securely. And if you take this hand off and you replace it with this more open hand that I showed earlier, you can get him doing two-handed poses. And one thing that's pretty cool is you can actually get him into pretty good aiming poses with the rifle. Something, I'll be honest, wasn't expecting to be able to do with this figure. I was going to figure the articulation, the sculpt just wouldn't allow for it. But you can get him pretty much almost in a full, rifle aiming pose. As you can see there, which I think is super cool, you can do that. I really wasn't expecting this figure to have that level of posability, so that's nice. There are some Black Series figures. There are some Figure Arts figures that can't do that. The Book of Boba Fett, Boba Fett figure that was just recently released a couple months ago cannot hold his rifle like this, so that's pretty impressive in my opinion. And then lastly, last accessory, I'll just get that, pop that off, and just put the fist back on. Is you can actually, where this claw is, you can take the claw off and you actually get this claw with a nice real metal chain on it. So, which is always cool to get kind of real metal chains. You can plug that in instead, and then he has his kind of grapple launcher thingy as this chain claw thing. And I think that is super cool. Of course, there's not really any practical way you can display him. Like, you can't have him display him shooting it out, which in some ways kind of been cool if it would have been a plastic piece. So you just display him it shooting out instead of just having it just kind of hang there. If you have another figure, you could have it wrapped around them. You can also do something like have the open hand or something and have them, like, I don't know, hold the other side. Kind of like that. You can do something like that. Either way, it's a super cool little extra accessory. It's always cool to get real metal chain pieces with figures. So that's really nice. You do want to be careful with this claw piece. Don't want to lose it. It can kind of knock out of place if you're swapping the hands or whatnot. So you're going to want to be careful. But very cool accessory and feature. So yeah, that is pretty much it. Taking a fair amount of time, but there's quite a bit to cover with this guy, I guess. It is a pretty awesome figure. I'm not gonna lie, I really do like it a lot. Before I kind of end off here, I will do some quick comparisons. Here he is with from a few years ago now, the movie Realization's Jango Fett, which they do look similar, but they are fairly different. There are some significant articulation differences. This figure actually does not, I can't talk about the original trilogy of Boba Fett, don't have any of those. But he really does not reuse very many parts from this Jango. The shoulder pads might be the same, and that's the only thing I could really see that is quite the same. I thought maybe the torsos are the same, but the way the jetpack plugs in is a bit different. So, yeah, it's pretty nice. They pretty much gave this guy a whole new sculpt when they could have probably gotten away with doing a fair amount of reuse. They didn't go that route, which is really nice. But I think these guys look really good together. The Mandalorian armor, like I said, just works really well for this kind of redesign. And then just with another movie Realization figure, here's one of the Darth Vaders they released. So they look really cool together as well. And then with a 6-inch figure, here is the 6-inch Black Series Throne Room Boba Fett. As you can see, like I said, this is a 7-inch scale figure, so he is a fair amount bigger and will not scale with your 6-inch stuff. If that is something you wanted to do, you're not going to be able to do that. But yeah, that's pretty much it overall. I think this is a really awesome figure. He looks amazing. He articulates a lot better than I was expecting him to. Really good articulation. Great array of accessories. Honestly, I think my only real complaint, aside from small nitpicks like the jetpack being a little loose and the hammer on the pistol and the rifle being kind of fragile and loose and easy to lose, those are just small issues. The only real major issue I have with this figure is the price point. In Canada, I can't speak to US, I don't know the conversion, but in Canada, after taxes, you're looking at around $200 for this guy, which is pretty steep, especially considering back in the day, the Jango Fett figure was only like a little over 100. So this figure is almost double the price, and in my opinion, doesn't offer a whole lot more that the Jango Fett offered. It is a better figure in my opinion, but not by a huge margin. For me, because I love the character, I really like this redesign. I think the figure was executed really well. I don't mind that I paid the price, but I could see the price point definitely being a turnoff for some people. But if you're a fan of the character, you can stomach the price point, and you're a big fan of this kind of redesign, because they are very cool looking figures, very unique thing to have on the shelf, something pretty different, while still being somewhat similar and familiar, then yeah, 100% recommend. I could definitely see this guy being on my top 10 figures of the year. I do really like it a lot, as I was expecting to, but that's just good. It reached in some ways exceeded my expectations. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. This was a long video. I apologize, but if you stuck out for the whole review, thanks. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and I'll see you all in the next one. May the Force be with you.